for another true crime video. If you saw the title of this video, you probably know this case. And you also know that I don't usually cover big, famous cases like this. I like to bring attention to those kind of unknown cases. However, this case has taken up a lot of space in my head, and I was discussing it with Sean, and as much as I love him, he knows nothing about this case at all, and I really want to discuss it with someone who does, and that leaves you, my friend. So I waited until the sentencing before I filmed this case, and I would like to talk about it with you now. This is the absolutely terrifying case of the Idaho 4. Sometime around 4 a.m. in the night of November of 2022, a figure in dark clothing and a mask entered a house in Moscow, Idaho, where 6 University of Idaho students were staying. This person went from one room to another, killing 4 of the 6 people before retreating into the night. It was a typical Saturday night out for 4 young college students near the tree-lined University of Idaho campus, just weeks before Thanksgiving break. Sana Kernoodle, age 20, and her boyfriend Ethan Chapin went to a party at his fraternity house. Meanwhile, best friends Madison Mogan and Haylee Gonsalves, I always say it wrong, both 21, went to a bar and ended the night with a food truck visit before they all 4 returned to their house just down the road from the campus at around 2 a.m. More than an hour later, a white car appeared in surveillance video taken by cameras in the neighborhood. The house was on like a dead-end street, but this white car, later identified as a Hyundai Elantra, could be seen passing the house several times, including at 4:04 a.m. when the car did this strange 3-point turn practically in the driveway. So as I said, the perpetrator broke into this 3-story, 6-bedroom house around 4 a.m. as most of the students inside slept. He came in through the second-floor kitchen sliding door, dressed all in black with a face mask. He headed first to the 3rd floor of the house, where he then murdered Madison and Haylee first. He then went down to the 2nd floor, where Zana was still awake. She had in fact just received a DoorDash order around 4 a.m. when she came face to face with this man after he had murdered her roommates. He then proceeded to murder her and her boyfriend, whom I believe slept through the whole thing. The other 2 roommates, Bethany Funk and Dylan Mortensen, were the only 2 roommates to survive this horrible night. Dylan Haylee say, "There's someone here." Minutes later, Dylan looked out her bedroom door for the first time, but did not see anything. She then opened her door a second time when she heard what she thought was crying coming from Xana's room. At that point, she heard a man's voice that she did not recognize say something like, "It's okay, I'm gonna help you." When she opened her door a third time, just a few minutes later, she saw a figure in black clothing and a mask that covered the person's mouth and nose, walking towards her. Dylan stood in this frozen shock phase as this man walked right past her. She said that she did not recognize him, but that he had bushy eyebrows. This figure continued on toward the back sliding glass door of the home, where he disappeared into the night. Dylan is terrified, of course, understandably, so she locks herself in her bedroom and starts exchanging text messages with Bethany. The students tried to text and call their other roommates, but they got no answer because they were dead in their bedrooms. "Please answer," Dylan texted Haylee at around 4:32. She exchanged this message with Bethany that said that she was freaking out after seeing this person outside of her door, and Bethany convinced Dylan to run downstairs so that they could be in the same room, which Dylan bravely did. Around 8 hours passed before the girls woke up. So they kind of didn't leave their bedrooms at first. They did some more messaging to see if they could get a hold of their roommates. Bethany called her parents. Dylan logged into Instagram and sent Snapchat messages and texts trying to get a hold of the roommates and other people. At 11:56 a.m., Bethany called 911 after a friend arrived at the house and discovered one of the victims. I've listened to this 911 call and it is so confusing, and a lot of people blame Bethany and Dylan for not checking on their roommates quicker. And in the 911 call, several people talked to this 911 operator. In fact, the 911 operator was like, "Stop passing the phone around. Somebody tell me what's going on." One person said, "My roommate was drunk last night and she's not waking up." I don't know if these kids, because they're all young, got close enough to Xana, because that's who I believe that they saw on the floor, like not in the doorway of her bedroom, but through the doorway of her bedroom. I don't believe that they got close enough to her to realize that she was deceased. I think maybe they called out to her because no one mentions any blood in this 911 call, and that to me is like, what? When you hear about the descriptions of what actually happened. Bethany, in a statement at the sentencing hearing, said, "If I had known, of course I would have called 911 right away." And she said that she still carries so much regret and guilt for not knowing what happened and not calling right away, even though she understands that it wouldn't have changed anything, even if the paramedics had been right outside the front door. So investigators arrive at the crime scene, and one of the first things that they see is Xana and Ethan. And the next cop goes upstairs and he finds Madison and Haylee. And when he saw Haylee, she was described asleep and didn't see him. I'm not sure. So, we'll talk more about my theories. Sorry, I got distracted. Later, as investigators are searching for evidence, they find a knife sheath with a United States Marine Corps logo on the bed. And I read two different things, that it was underneath Haylee and then it was next to Madison, but either way, it was in the bed with these two girls. Later, as investigators start searching for the car that is seen in the footage, they find a white Elantra registered to the Idaho State University, and they identify the owner as Brian Kohlberger. But he actually didn't become the focal point of this case until several weeks later. The knife sheath that the police had found did have DNA on it, but it didn't match anyone in law enforcement databases. So they sent it for further analysis that eventually yielded a more extensive profile that they could use for genetic genealogy with the help of consumer DNA databases. And at that point, they were able to identify a suspect by name. Later in December, they pull mobile phone records that showed on the night of the killings, Brian Kohlberger's phone stopped connecting to the cellular network at 2:47 a.m. when he was in Pullman. When the phone reconnected with the network at 4:48 a.m., it was south of Moscow. It then followed a route back to Pullman, and later that morning his phone was back in Moscow in the area near the crime scene. The phone's history also reflected that it had been in the area of this house 12 times in the months before the murders. By the end of December, Brian had returned to his parents' house in Pennsylvania. He and his father had driven on a cross-country road trip, and they were actually pulled over twice for tailgating. Each time they were let go without a warning. At that point, Brian had a new Washington State license plate on his car, which he had obtained 5 days before this crime. Police managed to obtain DNA samples taken from the trash found outside the Kohlbergers' Pennsylvania home, and they arrested Brian before dawn on December 30th of 2022. He was later extradited to Idaho. So when they arrested him, he was super chill. Like, they're talking about sports, they're talking about, all this stuff, and the one investigator, detective, I'm not sure, asks him if he knows what happened at the Idaho campus, and he says, sure, I watch the news. And they said, do you want to talk about it? And at this point, he asks for a lawyer. But he doesn't stop talking. He asks if his mom and dad are okay, asks if his dog is okay, and they try to steer him back towards the case, and he invokes his Fifth Amendment right. So they have to get him an attorney. So Brian Kohlberger was a criminal justice student. As a teenager, he posted online about his struggles and disassociation. He had thoughts of unaliving himself, a lack of emotion, and minimal remorse. In 2018, he described to a friend a lifelong struggle with depression. But he told this friend that he was doing well, and he had stopped using heroin, the drug that he had turned to when he had felt like unaliving himself. Later on in life, not that he was old, but he developed an interest in criminals. He told his friend that he saw survey listed Brian as a student investigator working with 2 professors, and it asked respondents to describe their thoughts, emotions, and actions from the beginning to the end of their crime commission process. In the fall semester of 2022, Mr. Kohlberger began studying at Washington State. Oh, I think I said his car was registered at Idaho State earlier. I meant Washington State. One classmate recalled that a few days before the killings, Brian had been highly engaged in a discussion about forensics DNA and other evidence that prosecutors used to win convictions. After the murders, the records show that he was still grading papers, as his job as a teaching assistant required. So, I'm kind of doing this a little out of order, but I thought we'd talk about the victims a little bit more now. Madison Mogan, who went by Maddie, was a senior from Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, who majored in marketing. Her grandmother, Kim Geely, said that Madison had always been a gentle and caring person who kept many long-term friendships and close ties with extended family. Madison's boyfriend, Jake, said that she had talked about wanting to explore other parts of the world. Madison's father, Ben, said that he did not believe anyone who had a personal relationship with Madison or her friends would want to just murder them. If you knew them, you loved them, he said. Haylee Gonsalves, who was from Rathdrum, Idaho, planned to move after graduation to Austin, Texas, with one of her close friends. This friend, Jordan, said that Haylee had secured a position with a marketing firm and was excited to explore more of the country. We wanted that adventure, Jordan said. I'd be like, let's do this. And she'd be like, I'm down. Olivia Gonsalves, Kaylee's older sister, said that Haylee and Madison had been bridesmaids in her wedding. Haylee and Madison, who were seniors at the University of Idaho at this time, would have graduated in 2023. At a vigil weeks after the murders, Kaylee's father, Steve, told the story of how these 2 absolutely beautiful young women met. They first met in the 6th grade and became inseparable. They just found each other, and every day they did homework together. They came to our house. They shared everything, he said, and then they started looking at colleges. They chose Idaho State together, and eventually got into the same apartment together. And in the end, he stated, they died together, in the same room, in the same bed. Ethan Chapin was from Conway, Washington, and he was one of a set of triplets. And he had spent much of November 12th, the day before the killings, with both of his siblings, who were also University of Idaho students. On the evening of the murders, they all attended a dance held by his sister's sorority. His mother, Stacy, said, "My kids are very thankful that it was time well spent with him. He was literally the life of the party. He made everyone laugh, and he was just the kindest person." Ethan played basketball in high school, and he was known by his friends and family members for always having a big smile. Sana Kernoodle grew up in Idaho, but she had spent time in Arizona in recent years, according to her father, Jeffrey. Jeffrey said that his daughter was strong-willed and enjoyed having an independent life in college. He expressed shock that his daughter could have been killed at home with her friends. She was with her friends all the time. That was her safe space. From what I could tell, Sana and Ethan had not been dating very long. I read several weeks, but I'm really not sure. So, in the more than 2 years since prosecutors had arrested Brian Kohlberger, they had not detailed a motive. course, some people in court became emotional as the names of their family members and loved ones were read out loud. I watched this, and Brian really remained impassive, including when he said yes to each and every charge. The brutal nature of this crime, the age of the victims, and Brian's background in criminology sparked intense public interest in this case, myself included, and there are many theories, but we were all awaiting the trial to find out all the things we didn't know about this case. The plea deal has divided a lot of people, including the families of the victims. Outside of the court, Kaylee's father Steve said he felt pretty let down. He felt like the state made a deal with the devil. The family really wanted a full confession, including details about the location of the murder weapon and confirmation that the defendant had acted alone. However, Madison's mother and stepfather said they supported the plea deal. They said in a statement read by their lawyer that they expressed gratitude to everyone who had supported them and the successful outcome. We support the plea agreement 100%. We turn from tragedy and mourning to the light of the future. We have closure. So last Wednesday, Judge Hibbler sentenced Brian Kohlberger to life in prison for the senseless slaughter of the 4 Idaho college students, after he refused to reveal his motive before learning his fate. Judge Hibbler was emotional when he talked to Brian, and at times he even choked up, and you can see him with the Kleenex wiping tears from his face, which really hurt my heart. He condemned Kohlberger to spend the rest of his life behind bars for committing unspeakable evil. The judge handed him 4 consecutive life sentences and an additional 10 years for the burglary charges, without the possibility of parole. During the nearly 3-hour hearing, devastated parents, grandparents, siblings, and the surviving roommates of the 4 slain students told Brian that nobody cares about him as they confronted the mass murderer. Kaylee Gonzalez's sister, Olivia, who has been an outspoken advocate for Kaylee and her lifelong best friend and fellow victim, Madison Mogan, said in a forceful statement to Brian that actually blew me away. If you have not listened to this, at least listen to her and Dylan's statements. Bethany's was read by someone else, but we'll talk about that in a minute. Okay. Olivia said, "My sister Kaylee and her best friend Maddie were not yours to take. They were not yours to study, to stalk, or to silence. They are everything that you could never be. Loved, accepted, vibrant, accomplished, brave, and powerful. They would have been kind to you. If you had approached them in their everyday lives, they would have given you directions, thanked you for their compliment. In a world that rejected you, they would have shown you mercy." Olivia said, I won't stand here and give you what you want." Tears and trembling. "You didn't win. You are a delusional, pathetic, hypochondriac loser who thought that you were so much smarter than everyone else. You aren't special or deep, not mysterious or exceptional. Don't ever get it tsunami. She said, "Sometimes I drop to the floor with my heart racing, convinced that something is very wrong. It's my body reliving everything over and over again." She said Kohlberger took away her ability to trust the world around her and shattered her in places she didn't know she could break. "I was barely 19 when he did this," she said. "I should have been figuring out who I was. I should have been figuring out the college experience. Instead, I was forced to learn how to survive the unimaginable. I couldn't be left alone. I had to sleep in my mom's room because I was too terrified to close my eyes." She called Kohlberger a hollow vessel, something less than human, a body without empathy, without remorse. She said he tried to take everything from me, my friends, my safety, my identity, my future. He took their lives, but I will continue to try to be like them, to make them proud. Living is how I honor them. The other surviving roommate, Bethany Funk, whose statement was read aloud by a friend, revealed that she slept in her parents' bedroom for a year after the murders, and that she made them double lock each door. She said that she has never slept fully through the night since, and that she constantly wakes up in a panic, worried that someone was breaking in and trying to hurt her or someone she loves. Bethany also expressed regret over not calling 911 sooner, as I mentioned before, but said that she knows there would not have been enough time to save her friends' lives. "Everything I do with them in mind. I'm still scared to go out in public, but I force myself to do things because I know that they would want me to keep living my life to the fullest. I am beyond blessed to still be here, and I refuse to take that for granted when they do not get the chance." as shown by the newly revealed documents against Haylee, were because he was angry that she was upstairs in bed with Maddie when it was supposed to just be Maddie in that room. Now, this is just me as an armchair detective making my own assumptions. I could be completely wrong. He may have had harder time subduing Haylee because Madison was, asleep, and Haylee did have many defensive wounds. I don't know. I have watched so many things about this case, recreations of the house because they tore it down 1 year after the crime. It has this strange layout, much like my own, where you can enter on the bottom floor, where Bethany's room was, or you could enter on the second floor where Hahna and Dylan's rooms were, which Brian did through the sliding glass door in the kitchen. He went directly upstairs to Maddie's room based on the evidence. So to me, that is someone who has studied the house and has a plan. He had some kind of backpack with him, and I'm curious to know exactly what was in that backpack. I read in one article that they found a backpack in the yard after, but I couldn't find any information as to whether it was true or what was in it. He planned this meticulously, even down to where he parked his car on like the cliffs above the house. I did read some of the documents that have been released. I haven't read the whole 300-page yet. There was some talk that Haylee had seen a strange man watching her while she had been letting Murphy out a couple of weeks before the crime. And that one day they came home and their door had been like busted off the hinges, and they had grabbed golf clubs to arm themselves. However, that could have been Brian breaking in to get the floor plan of the house while no one was home. I think it is incredible that they have not been able to link this man to any of them at any time. Whether it was that he had asked someone on a date and that someone had said no. I read somewhere that he had liked some of Bethany's pictures on Instagram or something, but then I read that wasn't true. This is one of those cases where I just need to know why. And it's stupid because I'm not a family member. I can only imagine what their families are feeling at this point in time. I think they're in the anger and bargaining state of the 5 stages of grief. They finally got to look this man in the eye, and Olivia was like, no, you sit up when I'm talking to you, because he was like slouched. And Steve said in an after interview that he had made eye contact with Brian Kohlberger to make sure that the man was paying attention to what he was saying. The fact that he sat through these testaments and this hearing, and he literally showed no remorse, no nothing. He barely moved. It's just bizarre to me. Sean believes it's some kind of control thing. He still holds control over them by not telling them why he did what he did. But in my mind, I like to believe I'm a good person. So I would want to reveal these things for the family's benefit. But then Sean brought up Ted Bundy, and he was like, well, Bundy never admitted anything. He just pretended like if he was the perpetrator of these crimes, this is what he would have done. It's a control thing. It's a power thing. He still has you basically by the cojones if he never admits or tells you what it is you want to know. And maybe that is the truth. Maybe this is the last and final way that Brian Kohlberger can exert this control that he wants over these people. But it is disgusting. You owe these people an explanation. And I honestly believe he took this plea deal so he did heard of this case. I'm sure you've watched other ASMR creators or non-ASMR creators cover it. But I would love to discuss it below in the comments with you. As I said, Sean doesn't know any of the details, and he's not discussing things with me properly. Anyway, this case will live on in my heart. I will carry a piece of Zana, Ethan, Maddie, and Kaylee with me as I continue through this world, as I do with several other cases that I just wish I could give people answers for. Anyway, thank you guys so much for being here. I hope that despite the fact that you probably knew about this case, you still enjoyed